Welcome back. ActionSA leader Herman Mashaba has heaped praise on political parties who have come together to form the multi-party charter for South Africa. He lauded them for putting their differences aside and finding ways to oust the ANC. The multi-party charter consists of the DA, IFP, Freedom Front Plus, ActionSA, United Independent Movement, Spectrum National Party, and Independent South African National Civic Organization. He said there should be no ambiguity about the removal of the ANC, and the agreement must be defined in a positive vision for South Africa, not against other political parties. All right, so we are joined now by Mr. Herman Mashaba. Very good evening to you, Mr. Mashaba. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Perhaps it would be a good place to start. That last sentence that I read, that you want the multi-party charter to be motivated not against other political parties. But isn't that a contradiction, given that one of the founding reasons that drove this get-together and that cements the agreement is to ensure that it's against other parties, namely the ANC and the EFF?
Well, first of all, yes, good evening, and thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. I think, Civic and fellow South Africans, it's important that we usher in a new dispensation for our country come 2024, or otherwise then South Africa will unfortunately fall into becoming one of the failed African states. We've had an ANC government for the last 29 years, and in the last 29 years, unfortunately, the big percentage of our democratic dispensation, South Africans have seen hell, where, as I'm talking to you today, we have just over 70 people being murdered every day. Every 60 seconds, there's a woman being raped in this country. We've got porous borders. We've got a criminal justice system that is dysfunctional. Our youth, I can really go on and on. Youth unemployment, sustainable unemployment rate in the world. So the only way we can bring about a peaceful transition, it's about removing the ANC. And how you remove the ANC is to mobilize South African voters and society to ensure that come 2024, we remove the ANC and bring a multi-party government. And why a multi-party government? If you look at the political developments in South Africa over the last few years, chances of any single party getting outright majority 50 plus one, I think one would really be too positive. We believe South Africa has entered, like all other democracies, most of the democracies in the world, where one party domination is a thing of the past. So we embrace that. We obviously, as ActionSA, would love to really get outright majority, and that's what we're going to campaign to get, outright majority. But in the event it does not really happen, where we need to work with other parties, that's why we had to really look at like-minded political parties and be strategic that this time let's not make the same mistake as we made in local government outcomes in 2016 and 2021, where you have to negotiate co-governance after elections. You know, because unfortunately the Constitution of South Africa only allows you 14 days to form a government, and we've learned the mistakes of allowing that 14 days to really be the only time. So this time around, we are saying ahead of the elections, let us agree on the core values of what we stand for as political parties. What are the key priorities of this particular party? And also the commitment that in the event we don't get the outright majority, none of us must work with the ANC.
So let's talk about that, the quality of the democratic representation of this pact, of this multi-party plan. There is a view that South Africans still vote along party lines, and it might not actually be receptive, the country, to the idea of voting with a coalition government in mind. So should you indeed reach that Rubicon of gaining 50+1 as a coalition, the question is then whose policy directives are adopted, particularly if it's a matter of numbers?
Well, I think if one looks at the political developments lately, I think there's a very, very good that the ANC will not really get outright majority. That's why we're preparing ourselves. If you look at the contract we signed, the agreement we signed on Thursday in front of the whole nation, in front of the entire world, we've already agreed on the core values of what we stand for. We stand for non-racial South Africa. We stand, all of us, we stand for free market economy. We stand for the rule of law, independent criminal justice system, and so forth. And we stand for ethical leadership. In fact, what I'm excited about personally, it's one of the things that we agree that in the event we have to really form a government, the executive, any of the members from each party must accept to undertake a lifestyle audit, because if you look at the level of deep-rooted corruption in our country over the last 29 years of our democracy, it's so deep that we cannot take chances where political parties will impose corrupt people we discover afterwards. So we agreed upfront that if a party presented a candidate for an executive position, that particular individual from all the parties must accept that they will undertake a lifestyle audit and the results of which will be made public. So it's up to you as political parties to do the vetting of your public representatives that they are ethical people.
Lifestyle audits are one thing. Again, I go back to democratic representation. Say, as a parliamentary government, you have, as you talk about, these autonomous bodies who will be campaigning on their individual policies. But when it comes down to governance, a government must then adopt a singular common policies. And yet you may have such strong divergence on how to go about it. So one of the political analysts said, sure, as an agreed upon vision, it's a very good idea, but how will it be implemented?
Well, I think fortunate enough, coalition government is something that if you look at developed democracies, ever since the Second World War, most of Western and on a basis of a coalition. And a coalition means that so in terms of co-governance, when we have other parties, what we do is we put together our manifestos, and obviously where we agree, where we don't agree. But at the end of the day, we have to co-govern by accommodating the manifestos of the various political parties. It is for that reason, to just give you an example, that we cannot really go into coalition with a party that does not believe in a non-racial society. We cannot go into government with a political party that does not believe in free market economy. Those are things that, some things that, you can agree about them in advance. That's why a question of the EFF ruling it out is because of the economic policies. I mean, you can imagine for the EFF, once the EFF takes over government with the ANC,
Mr. Mashaba, we are running out of time, and I need to ask you this question. I recall a conversation you and I had just over several months ago. It was a question of who will lead the processes before and after. The Freedom Front Plus said going into this conversation that they preferred the candidate to lead this pact, the likely presidential candidate to be the IFP's leader, Nkosini Hlabisa. That's despite the DA being the official opposition. But your national chair, Michael Beaumont, explained that there had been no discussions around the leadership for the overall pact over the past 12 weeks, that there have been consultative meetings. Do you think that come that moment that you're all hoping for, that there will be absolute agreement? Because our conversation, you and I, what we last had was that you don't want to be led by the DA.
Well, what we agreed is that it does not really necessarily mean that the party that emerges to be the biggest political party will naturally become the president of the country. However, we've made a concession, and the agreements are there on our platforms. We stand them in front of the entire nation, where we are saying, in the event we have a biggest party, but they don't have a suitable candidate to be the president, we have to really look amongst the other parties to see who has got a broader appeal to all South Africans to really be the president. However, the party with a majority will then be the leader of executive business in ensuring that we hold the executive accountable, be in the legislature. So that's a compromise that we made. But in terms of the person from emerging from that party, we all agreed it's in the agreements, open agreements, that decision we will make it once the results are announced.
All right. Thank you so much for speaking to us, Herman Mashaba, the leader of ActionSA. Of course, I'm sure we will have more conversations on this particular issue